Steve Wood. We all know that Scientology is toxic, and I cannot believe that Scientology staff members are delivering positive news every week. Surely they must get together and discuss the fact that they cannot get new members. Do you think it ever occurs to them now that their ability to attract new public is not going to get better? How do they reconcile their dismal results week after week? All right, Steve, thank you very much for this question, and it is a good one. First, I'd like to say that if you're talking about Scientology staff or Sea Org or people who are dedicated themselves to this cause, if they're still showing up, if they're still reporting for duty and doing the work, then the odds are they're in a headspace where they're convinced that it is going to get better. It does get a bit of a grind, I can tell you, being a staff member, week after week after week after week. And after a while, you're wondering, are we doing anything? And that's, in fact, why I joined the Sea Org, is because after 8 years of staff in Santa Barbara, I knew we weren't getting it done. And so I decided I needed to move up. Not everybody does that, of course. A lot of people move right out. They just go, this is for the birds, or I did my time, or I signed my contract. I'll fill out the obligation or the responsibility of it. But otherwise, I'm going to continue with Scientology. Everybody, who's in this thing is all there for Scientology. But as far as being the dedicated, deliverer of Scientology, the staff or the Sea Org, it does get rough, and it does get dejecting, and you do feel like, man, are we ever really gonna bust through this? And this is why the semi-annual events, the ones that, they have like 6 or 7 of these things every year, are so important, because these are the booster shots. These are the shots of adrenaline that the staff and the Sea Org need in order to keep going. So those events are actually really crucial. And I believe that not having had these events over this last year and a half that we've been dealing with COVID, Scientology has suffered as a result, and they probably lost staff and probably lost people, public for sure. And of course, the exposure of Scientologists as criminals. I mean, we've got this, the chiropractors and the doctors and the various people who have been indicted and convicted of crimes. And we have Danny Masterson, of course, in the news. So Scientologists see that, or are aware of some of that, certainly. But as far as, how they keep going, or what is it that, do they ever think that they're, that it's ever, does it occur to them that it's not going to get better? No, that's the part where I would go, hang on, okay? Because as dejected and down, as bad as it gets and everything, remember that there's a few little, points of indoctrination. There's a few little points that the staff get to hold on to that keep giving them hope, okay? One, not all the staff and not all the Sea Org have been around forever, and so some of them don't know all the stuff we know about the history of Scientology and about its rocky road and its lack of expansion over time. So they don't necessarily think the same way about it that we do, where it's just, how can you just keep on with the grind year after year, right? There is that factor. Another factor is that you have a lot of tools and a lot of policies, a lot of pieces of tech that are staff specific, that are used to handle, debug, resuscitate, revitalize the staff and the Sea Org, of course. By staff, Sea Org, pretty much same thing as far as these tools go. You have audited actions, not just confessionals or sec checks. That's, we talk about that a lot because it's such an abusive practice, but that's not the only tool in the toolkit. There is a division in the organizations called the qualifications division, and this is supposed to be a self-correcting area where people can go and get corrected and fixed up if they're not doing their job, or they don't feel they're doing their job, or they're running into issues or problems. And a cramming officer is a staff member who is trained to do this kind of interview and find out where the person's having trouble and narrow it down and get an exact piece of Hubbard advice or Hubbard methodology that will fix or address that situation and help the staff member out. And this gives a staff member the idea that they can keep going because they went, oh, I was doing this wrong. Okay, well, let me go fix that now and apply this policy correctly or do this particular method correctly, and then I'll get better results. And sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't, But because Scientology is very hit and miss, sometimes it seems like it produces a result, and sometimes it doesn't. And you can, get into that kind of a situation where you're kind of desperate for a result and you can't seem to get one, and then you go and get corrected, and then and then it looks like everything's fine. Until you run into the next brick wall, right? And this kind of cycle goes on. You also have the statistics and the condition formulas. And it was interesting because, when I was a young Scientologist, sort of fresh off the boat, really. In fact, before I'd even joined staff, I did a course about the conditions, about all these formulas and statistics and how you figure out which condition to apply. Are you normal this week, or are you in danger, or is there an emergency? Or, what steps are you supposed to take? And Hubbard has these all broken down. And I thought, wow, this is genius, man. I mean, if this is all you got to do, and it's, and it's guaranteed that your statistics are going to go up or that everything's going to be fine if you just do these steps, what's the big deal? I asked a staff member, I said, hey, Mike, his name was Mike. I said, hey, these condition formulas, I mean, these things are great. It seems like if you just do them every week, everything would be great. And he sort of smiled and was like a little, yeah, it would be, you would think it would be that way, but sometimes trying to figure out how to apply those condition formulas is not necessarily as obvious as you might think, or the steps take longer, or you run into various problems, or, right? So while it might seem easy, it's not. And that was me speaking out of my, naivete, right? Because I then joined staff thinking, oh, look at all these tools, look at all this stuff, we have all this technology, look at all these books, look at all this material, it's going to be great. There's so much potential and possibility here for me to realize. And then over time, you start realizing these condition formulas and these debugs and these crammings and all these tools and stuff can fix certain things, but they're not going to fix the fact that, Scientology just doesn't produce results all the time. And that there's a whole lot of people out there who just don't want to hear about it and are not interested in buying our books and don't want to, come in and take a personality test. And then you're kind of stuck. Then you realize, wow, we are kind of stuck here. And then you kind of accept, okay, we're only going to be able to do so much, right? Or I'm going to keep plugging away. I'm going to keep doing this because it's just, and here's, Steve, the ultimate final bottom line answer to your question, okay, is that you, as a staff member, as a Sea Org member, you get to a place where you go, well, look, maybe I'm not getting, or maybe we're not getting all the results or all the successes, and maybe it's not taking off the way Hubbard says it's supposed to, but what else am I supposed to do? This stuff, this Scientology stuff works as far as I'm concerned. It's the only thing I see or know that's going to help anybody out of this mess, help people really spiritually in the real long run, beyond the body, beyond this immediate life. This is the only thing that's going to help them. I mean, this is what they really, really believe. And they joined staff, they joined the Sea Org out of an honest desire to help. I never met a single staff member or a single Sea Org member who didn't join because they wanted to help. So, it doesn't help, but that's what they want. And so they settle into the belief that even if it's just one person a week I'm helping, at least I'm doing that much. At least it's something better than nothing. And that tends to reduce down to an acceptable level for them of at least they're doing something about it, right? And that's what allows them to keep going. And that's far, it is far from only Scientologists who end up in that headspace. So Some of you watching this might have arrived in that headspace in your job, right? So you can kind of connect with what I'm talking about here. Is it's just, because they're not going to I'm not going to say very, but rarely is that the thing that starts sparking, oh, maybe this doesn't work, and maybe my life is a lie, and maybe this whole thing, that you get those times where you get really dejected and you get really down and you feel awful about your life. I think we all run into that. And somebody comes along, your significant other, your boss, a coworker, a friend, somebody, your parents, and cheers you up, gives you a pep talk. It gets you going again. And you pick yourself up and you dust yourself off and you keep going, right? Because you think what you're doing is basically the right thing to do. And Scientologists think that, all the way to the end. They're thinking this is the right thing to be doing. It's just a matter of, I wish it could be better. I wish we could be doing more. But I'm not going to stop. You see what I mean? That's kind of the attitude there. So I hope that maybe casts a little bit more light on how and why staff and Sea Org stick with it for as long as they do, because they have all these reasons and hopes to do so. So there you go.